Distraction is not the problem. Lack of control is. Your attention is being pulled all day. By noise. By impulse. By habit. Each distraction weakens focus. Each reaction trains instability. This audiobook is about overcoming distractions. Not by fighting them. By outgrowing them. Control begins with stillness. Discipline restores attention. And attention restores power. Distraction is not accidental. It is trained. You were not born scattered. You were taught to be. Every time you check without intention. Every time you switch tasks midstream. Every time you react immediately. You are training distraction. That's the key. Distraction is learned through repetition. What you allow repeatedly becomes automatic. Most people believe distraction is caused by the world. By technology. By demands. That belief removes responsibility. And responsibility is where control begins. You have a choice. You can keep blaming external noise. Or you can recognize the pattern you've been reinforcing. Patterns do not care about excuses. They only respond to repetition. If you repeat distraction, you become distractible. This is not a character flaw. It is conditioning. You check your phone out of boredom. The brain learns escape. You switch tasks when resistance appears. The brain learns avoidance. You respond immediately to every ping. The brain learns urgency. Over time, these behaviors run without permission. Automatic behavior replaces deliberate action. That is how control is lost. Most people try to fight distraction with motivation. They tell themselves to focus harder. They promise to do better tomorrow. That fails. Motivation is unreliable. Training is not. It's not about willpower. It's about discipline. Discipline retrains what repetition installed. Awareness is the first interruption. Without awareness, training continues unchecked. You cannot change what you do not see. So you start by noticing. Not judging. Not fixing yet. Noticing. When do you lose focus? What pulls you fastest? What you reach for under discomfort? Stillness makes this visible. When you slow down, distraction becomes obvious. You feel the impulse to check. The urge to switch. The need to escape silence. These urges are not commands. They are habits surfacing. That's the key. An urge is evidence of training, not necessity. You don't need their permission to pause. You do not need approval to resist the urge. You are allowed to wait. Most people react to urges automatically. Urge appears. Action follows. That sequence is what must stop. Reaction reinforces training. Pause interrupts it. You have a choice. When the urge appears, you can act. Or you can observe. Observation weakens the habit. Acting strengthens it. This is how retraining begins. Not by eliminating distraction immediately. By interrupting the automatic loop. At first, the interruption feels uncomfortable. The mind wants relief. The body wants stimulation. This discomfort is temporary. It is the nervous system adjusting. Most people mistake discomfort for failure. It is not failure. It is withdrawal from distraction. Distraction has been serving as relief. Removing it exposes restlessness. You stay anyway. Staying builds tolerance. Tolerance builds control. Control changes identity. That's the key. What you tolerate determines what you control. Distraction thrives when you escape discomfort. Discipline grows when you remain present. It's not about pleasure. It's about discipline. Discipline is the ability to stay when escape is easier. You do not need to eliminate distractions all at once. You need to stop reinforcing them. That means fewer automatic checks, fewer unnecessary switches, fewer instant reactions. Each reduction matters. Training reverses the same way it was built. Through repetition. If distraction was trained by repeating escape, focus is trained by repeating return. Return to the task. Return to the breath. Return to stillness. Again. And again. This is not dramatic. It is quiet. Quiet training produces stable results. Most people want fast change. Fast change rarely lasts. Slow retraining does. That's the key. Stability beats intensity. Distraction also trains your emotional system. When you distract yourself from discomfort, you teach the nervous system that discomfort is dangerous. It is not. Discomfort is neutral. Avoiding it increases sensitivity. Facing it calmly reduces its power. This matters because distraction and emotional reactivity are linked. A system trained to escape discomfort reacts faster. A system trained to stay becomes resilient. Stillness is the training ground. In stillness, there is no distraction to hide behind. Thoughts surface. Emotions rise. Urges appear. You observe them without moving. This is not passive. It is active regulation. You are teaching the system that stillness is safe. Safe stillness allows focus to grow. Focus cannot grow in constant motion. Most people fill every gap. Music. Audio. Scrolling. They fear empty space. Empty space is where retraining happens. That's the key. If you never allow stillness, distraction remains dominant. You don't need their permission to sit quietly. You do not need validation to remove stimulation. You are allowed to be still. Stillness is a strategic advantage. It exposes habits. It weakens impulses. It restores choice. Choice is power. When you regain choice, distraction loses authority. You are no longer pulled automatically. You decide. Decision replaces impulse. Impulse fades with repetition. This is not about perfection. You will get distracted. You will notice late sometimes. That is normal. The discipline is noticing and returning. Not criticizing. Not escalating. Returning. Each return is training. Each return rewires behavior. Over time, the urge weakens. Not because you suppress it. Because you stop rewarding it. Behavior that is not rewarded fades. This is behavioral law. Distraction persists because it is rewarded with relief. Remove the reward. Stay through discomfort. The system adapts. You become calmer. Less reactive. More stable. Not because the world changed. Because training changed. You have a choice. You can keep reinforcing distraction. Or you can begin retraining attention. One keeps you scattered. The other builds control. Control is not loud. It is reliable. Reliable attention produces reliable action. Reliable action produces consistent outcomes. This chapter is about responsibility. Not blame. Responsibility gives you leverage. Once you see distraction is trained, you stop treating it as fate. You stop fighting symptoms. You change behavior. Awareness interrupts the loop. Interruption creates space. Space allows discipline to act. That's the key. Awareness is the first interruption. Without it, distraction runs unchecked. With it, retraining begins. You learned that distraction is learned. You learned that repetition makes it automatic. You learned that awareness breaks the cycle. Now you must address what keeps the cycle alive. Reaction. Automatic reaction is distraction's strongest ally. You learned how distraction is trained. Now it's time to stop feeding it. Reaction is the engine of distraction. Without reaction, distraction starves. Most people do not realize this. They believe distraction just happens. They believe attention is taken from them. It is not taken. It is handed over through reaction. That's the key. Reaction gives distraction its power. Something appears. A sound. A thought. A feeling. You react immediately. That reaction trains the system to stay alert. To stay scattered. To stay open to interruption. Automatic reaction is the habit that must stop. You have a choice. You can keep reacting the moment something appears. Or you can pause and decide. Most people skip the pause. They respond to messages instantly. They switch tasks without thinking. They follow impulses without noticing. They call this efficiency. It is not. It is loss of control. Reaction feels fast. It feels productive. But speed without direction creates chaos. When you react, you are not choosing. You are complying. Compliance trains weakness. Stillness trains authority. You do not need their permission to pause. You do not need approval to wait before responding. Silence is allowed. Reaction thrives on immediacy. Remove immediacy. Reaction weakens. This is not theory. It is physiology. When something triggers you, the body reacts first. Heart rate increases. Breathing shortens. Muscles tense. If you act here, you act under stress. Stress narrows attention. Narrowed attention misses information. Missed information creates mistakes. That's the key. Reaction reduces accuracy. Most people try to think faster under pressure. That fails. You do not need faster thinking. You need regulated timing. Timing begins with pause. Pause does not mean inaction. It means control before movement. You pause long enough for the system to settle. Seconds matter. Those seconds determine whether you act deliberately or impulsively. Reaction skips those seconds. You stop skipping them. This is where discipline replaces habit. It's not about emotion. It's about discipline. Emotion demands action now. Discipline delays action until clarity arrives. Most people believe delay is weakness. It is not. Delay is strength when it is intentional. Intentional delay creates leverage. You see more. You hear more. You decide better. Reaction blinds. Stillness reveals. That's the key. Stillness is informational. When you pause, you notice what is actually happening. You notice tone. You notice context. You notice your own internal state. Reaction ignores all of this. Reaction is narrow. Discipline is wide. You practice stopping reaction in small moments. A notification appears. You do not check immediately. An urge to switch tasks appears. You do not move. A thought interrupts. You let it pass. These are not dramatic acts. They are repetitions. Repetition rewires behavior. Each time you pause instead of reacting, you weaken the habit. Each time you react, you strengthen it. You decide which one you repeat. You have a choice. Most people react because they fear discomfort. Silence feels uncomfortable. Waiting feels uncomfortable. Not responding feels uncomfortable. Discomfort is not danger. It is information. Information telling you where discipline is needed. Avoiding discomfort trains distraction. Facing discomfort trains control. That's the key. What you avoid controls you. Reaction is avoidance. Pause is confrontation. You confront the urge calmly. You do not fight it. You do not suppress it. You observe it. Observation creates distance. Distance restores choice. Choice is power. Most people believe reaction is natural. It is not. It is conditioned. Children are not born checking phones. They are trained. Adults are not born scattered. They are trained. Training can be reversed. But only if reaction stops being automatic. You don't need their permission to change your timing. You do not need validation to respond later. You are allowed to choose when you act. Choosing timing changes everything. When you respond later, responses improve. When you act calmer, outcomes improve. This applies to work, to relationships, to internal dialogue. Reaction also happens internally. A thought appears. You follow it immediately. A worry arises. You rehearse it. An idea pops up. You abandon the current task. This internal reaction is just as destructive. You stop that too. A thought appears. You pause. You do not follow the first thought. First thoughts are often reactive. Second thoughts are clearer. Pause allows the second thought to appear. That's the key. Clarity is delayed by seconds, not minutes. Most people never wait long enough to reach it. They act too soon. You stop doing that. Reaction feels like movement. Pause feels like restraint. Restraint is discipline in action. Discipline is not force. It is control of sequence. Sequence matters. Regulate. Observe. Decide. Act. Reaction reverses this order. Act first. Then justify. Then regret. You choose the correct sequence. You practice it daily. In low-stakes moments first. You do not start under extreme pressure. You train in calm conditions. Calm. Training holds under stress. That's the key. Stillness practiced daily becomes automatic under pressure. Over time, something shifts. You no longer feel pulled as strongly. Urgency loses credibility. Distraction feels obvious. This is not because you removed distractions. It is because you removed reaction. Distractions without reaction have little power. They appear. They fade. Reaction keeps them alive. Most people think they must eliminate distractions to focus. They do not. They must eliminate reaction. When reaction stops, distractions lose authority. You don't need perfect conditions. You need disciplined timing. This is liberating. You stop blaming the environment. You stop fighting circumstances. You focus on what you control. Your response. Your timing. Your attention. This restores confidence. Not loud confidence. Quiet certainty. Certainty that you will not act impulsively. Certainty that you will pause. Certainty that you will decide deliberately. This certainty reduces anxiety. Anxiety comes from unpredictability. When you know how you will respond, fear weakens. Reaction creates unpredictability. Pause creates reliability. Reliability builds trust in yourself. Trust stabilizes attention. Stable attention defeats distraction. Everything connects. You have a choice. You can continue reacting automatically. Or you can install pause as default. Default behaviors define identity. Identity determines outcomes. This chapter is about interruption. Interrupting the habit that keeps distraction alive. Reaction is that habit. Stop feeding it. Pause instead. Observe instead. Decide instead. This is not dramatic. It is disciplined. You learned that distraction is trained through repetition. Now you know that reaction is the repetition that keeps it alive. Remove reaction. Retraining begins. Next, you must decide what deserves your attention at all. Not everything qualifies. Not everything deserves your attention. Most people never decide this. They let attention respond to whatever appears. Whatever is loud. Whatever feels urgent. This is how distraction survives. Attention without standards is vulnerable. That's the key. If everything qualifies, nothing is controlled. You have a choice. You can let attention be claimed by default. Or you can decide what earns access. Deciding is discipline. Most people confuse attention with awareness. They believe noticing everything makes them informed. It does not. It makes them overloaded. Overload weakens judgment. Judgment is required for control. Every input competes for limited capacity. When capacity is exceeded, attention fragments. Fragmentation produces stress. Stress is not caused by work. It is caused by excess input. You are not overwhelmed because life is too much. You are overwhelmed because you allow too much in. This must stop. Not by withdrawal. By selection. Selection is active control. You don't need their permission to ignore something. You do not need approval to disengage. Silence is allowed. Most distractions present themselves as important. Notifications. Messages. Updates. Opinions. Very few are critical. Urgency is often manufactured. Manufactured urgency exists to capture attention. If you respond to it automatically, you train compliance. Compliance trains distraction. That's the key. What you respond to repeatedly becomes priority in your nervous system. Your nervous system does not understand importance. It understands repetition. If you repeatedly attend to noise, noise becomes normal. If you repeatedly attend to clarity, clarity becomes stable. Most people try to manage attention in the moment. That fails. The moment is emotional. Standards must be decided before the moment. You decide what qualifies for attention when you are calm. Then you enforce it when you are not. This is discipline. It's not about preference. It's about protection. Protection of mental energy. Mental energy is finite. Every unnecessary input drains it. Drained energy reduces patience. Reduced patience increases reaction. Reaction feeds distraction. This cycle continues until you intervene. Intervention begins with rules. Simple ones. What gets immediate attention? What gets delayed attention? What gets no attention? Most things fall into the last category. That realization is uncomfortable. You fear missing something. That fear is exaggerated. What you miss by constant engagement is greater. You miss depth. You miss clarity. You miss sustained focus. Depth is where results come from. Results do not come from scattered attention. You have a choice. You can chase everything. Or you can commit to what matters. Commitment requires exclusion. Exclusion feels harsh at first. It is not. It is precise. Precision restores control. Deciding what deserves attention also applies internally. Thoughts compete just like external inputs. Worries. Judgments. Replays. Most people follow every thought as if it were important. It is not. Thoughts are suggestions. You do not need to accept them all. You notice the thought. You decide if it qualifies. Most do not. They react internally just as they react externally. Internal reaction fragments attention as much as external switching. You stop this. A thought appears. You pause. You ask one question. Does this deserve attention now? If not, you let it pass. No argument. No analysis. Refusal is enough. That's the key. What you do not engage with loses strength. Engagement feeds repetition. Repetition builds habit. Habit shapes identity. Identity shapes outcomes. This chain begins with attention. Stillness helps you enforce this. In stillness, there is no external pressure. You see what the mind brings forward on its own. This reveals priorities you did not choose. Anxieties. Obsessions. Old concerns. These are trained loops. You do not fight them. You observe. You decide. Decision breaks the loop. Most people avoid stillness because it exposes mental clutter. That clutter already exists. Stillness only reveals it. Revealed clutter can be cleared. Hidden clutter continues draining energy. That's the key. Avoidance protects distraction. Facing reveals control. You don't need their permission to sit quietly with your mind. You do not need validation to reduce input. You are allowed to be selective. Selective attention is not ignorance. It is strategy. Strategy focuses resources. Resources focused produce results. Deciding what deserves attention also means setting time boundaries. When attention is allowed. When it is protected. When it is unavailable. Without time boundaries, everything feels urgent. With boundaries, urgency loses power. You decide that certain periods are for focus only. No checking. No switching. No responding. This is not selfish. It is necessary. Focus cannot exist without protection. Protected attention deepens. Deep attention stabilizes emotion. Emotion stabilizes behavior. Behavior improves outcomes. Everything connects. You have a choice. You can keep treating attention as open territory. Or you can defend it deliberately. Defense is not aggression. It is containment. Contained systems are stable. Uncontained systems are chaotic. Most people live in chaos mentally. Not because life is chaotic. Because attention is unmanaged. You correct this by narrowing. Fewer inputs. Clear priorities. Defined focus. Narrowing feels limiting. It is freeing. Freedom from noise. Freedom from constant pull. Freedom from mental fatigue. Fatigue is often attentional, not physical. When attention stops scattering, energy returns. You feel calmer without resting more. This is efficiency. Deciding what deserves attention also clarifies values. What you attend to reflects what you value. If you attend to outrage, you value stimulation. If you attend to progress, you value growth. If you attend to discipline, you value control. Attention reveals priorities. If you do not like what attention reveals, change where it goes. This is responsibility. Not blame. Responsibility gives leverage. You do not fix distraction by fighting symptoms. You fix it by choosing inputs. This choice must be repeated. Daily. Quietly. No announcements. No drama. Just enforcement. Enforcement builds reliability. Reliability builds trust. Trust in yourself reduces anxiety. Anxiety often comes from feeling pulled in many directions. When attention is directed, anxiety drops. That's the key. Direction calms the system. Most people try to calm themselves emotionally. They should calm attention instead. Emotion follows focus. Change focus. Emotion adapts. This chapter is about authority. Authority over what enters your mind. Without this authority, reaction dominates. With it, discipline leads. You learned that distraction is trained. You learned that reaction feeds it. Now you know that uncontrolled access keeps it alive. Decide what deserves attention. Everything else waits. This decision simplifies everything that follows. Because once attention is selective, silence becomes possible. And silence is where distraction truly weakens. You learned how distraction is trained. You learned how reaction keeps it alive. Now you have learned how selection removes its fuel. Next, you must remove the environment that constantly challenges this decision. Noise. Constant noise. Noise is not neutral. It shapes behavior. Constant sound. Constant updates. Constant stimulation. These conditions train distraction. Most people live inside noise all day. Music playing. Videos running. Notifications interrupting. They believe this is normal. It is not. That's the key. Noise keeps the nervous system unsettled. An unsettled system seeks relief. Relief comes through distraction. Distraction becomes habit. Habit becomes identity. You have a choice. You can keep surrounding yourself with noise. Or you can remove what weakens control. Removing noise is not isolation. It is discipline. Discipline decides what enters the system. Most people think noise helps them focus. They believe background stimulation keeps them engaged. It does the opposite. Noise fragments attention. It shortens patience. It accelerates thinking. Accelerated thinking reduces accuracy. Reduced accuracy creates mistakes. Mistakes increase stress. Stress feeds more distraction. This loop continues until noise is reduced. You do not need their permission to reduce noise. You do not need approval to turn things off. Silence is allowed. Silence is not empty. It is corrective. When noise drops, internal signals become audible. Breath. Tension. Thought speed. These signals guide regulation. Noise hides them. Most people avoid silence because it feels uncomfortable. Thoughts surface. Emotions rise. Restlessness appears. They interpret this as a problem. It is not. It is backlog. Noise suppresses backlog. Silence reveals it. Revealed backlog can be processed. Suppressed backlog continues draining energy. That's the key. Silence feels difficult because it is necessary. Removing noise begins externally. You reduce background sound during work. You stop filling every gap with media. You limit constant audio input. At first, attention rebels. It searches for stimulation. It reaches for the familiar. This is conditioning. You do not obey. You stay with the quiet. Staying retrains the nervous system. The system learns that stillness is safe. Safety reduces urgency. Urgency fuels distraction. Remove urgency. Distraction weakens. Noise also includes informational clutter. Endless updates. Breaking news cycles. Constant opinions. Most of it adds agitation, not clarity. Agitation feels like awareness. It is not. Awareness requires calm. Calm requires quiet. You do not need to know everything. You need to think clearly about what matters. That's the key. More information does not improve judgment. Less noise does. Most people confuse being informed with being effective. Effectiveness comes from integration. Integration requires space. Space is created by silence. You also remove social noise. Not every conversation deserves participation. Not every emotional exchange requires engagement. Some interactions drain attention without adding value. You step back calmly. No explanation. No argument. Distance is a tool. Distance restores perspective. Perspective supports control. You don't need their permission to disengage temporarily. You are allowed to protect your internal state. Your internal state determines how you act. Weak internal conditions produce weak decisions. Strong internal conditions produce stability. Stillness strengthens internal conditions. Stillness is not passive. It is a trained behavior. It slows perception. It widens awareness. It restores choice. When noise is constant, choice disappears. Everything feels urgent. Urgency removes discipline. Silence restores timing. Timing restores control. That's the key. Control is often lost through speed, not difficulty. When noise drops, time feels different. Moments stretch. Decisions slow. Reactivity decreases. This is not inefficiency. It is accuracy. Accuracy matters more than speed. Especially when attention is involved. Most people rush because noise creates pressure. Remove the noise. Pressure fades. What remains is signal. Signal guides action. Noise misleads. Removing noise also improves recovery. Sleep deepens. Mental fatigue reduces. Emotional baseline stabilizes. These effects compound quietly. You feel steadier without trying harder. This is efficiency through subtraction. Most people try to add solutions. More tools. More content. More stimulation. They should subtract. Subtraction reveals structure. Structure holds attention. Attention supports discipline. Everything connects. You have a choice. You can keep flooding the system. Or you can lower the volume deliberately. Lower volume increases signal. Signal improves judgment. Judgment improves outcomes. Removing noise also exposes distraction patterns. Without constant input, you notice impulses more clearly. The urge to check. The urge to escape. The urge to fill space. These urges are habits. Habits lose strength when not fed. Silence starves them. That's the key. Noise feeds distraction. Silence weakens it. Stillness also improves focus training. When the environment is quiet, attention can hold longer. Depth becomes possible. Depth produces results. Results reinforce discipline. Discipline stabilizes attention. The loop strengthens. You do not need perfection. You need consistency. Short periods of silence daily. Protected. Intentional. Not as relaxation. As training. You sit without input. You walk without audio. You work without background noise. You allow the mind to operate without interference. At first, it feels exposed. Then it feels stable. Stability is the goal. Most people fear silence because it removes distraction. Distraction has been masking instability. Removing it reveals what needs training. This is good. Training begins where weakness appears. You don't need their permission to face that. You do not need validation to be quiet. Quiet is strength. Removing noise does not mean eliminating all stimulation forever. It means choosing when stimulation is allowed. Choice restores authority. Authority over inputs changes everything. You stop feeling pulled constantly. You stop reacting reflexively. You regain composure. This composure supports every chapter that follows. Without noise, selection becomes easier. Pause becomes natural. Discipline holds. Noise undermines all of it. That's why this chapter matters. You cannot overcome distraction while living in constant stimulation. The environment must support the goal. You shape the environment. The environment shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. This is practical. No philosophy. No motivation. Design. You design conditions that reduce noise. When noise reduces, distraction weakens. When distraction weakens, attention holds. When attention holds, control returns. You have a choice. You can keep tolerating noise. Or you can remove what erodes focus. Removing noise is not dramatic. It is quiet. Quiet is where control is built. This chapter is about subtraction. Removing what interferes with attention. Once noise is reduced, a new challenge appears. Holding attention deliberately. Quiet creates opportunity. Discipline must use it. You learned how distraction is trained. You learned how reaction feeds it. You learned how uncontrolled access keeps it alive. Now you have removed the constant interference. Next, you must learn how to stay focused without escape. Not briefly. Deliberately. Focus is not a feeling. It is a behavior. Most people wait to feel focused. They wait for motivation. They wait for the right mood. That is why focus never holds. That's the key. Focus does not arrive. It is enforced. You have a choice. You can keep waiting for focus to appear. Or you can build it through discipline. Discipline is what stays when feeling disappears. Most people try to force focus. They tense up. They push harder. They demand performance. This fails. Force creates resistance. Resistance shortens endurance. It's not about effort. It's about discipline. Discipline controls behavior without negotiation. Building focus through discipline starts with constraint. One task. One direction. One period of time. Anything more divides attention. Division weakens depth. Depth is where control is built. When attention stays with one task, the nervous system adapts. Processing deepens. Clarity increases. Most people never reach this stage. They leave too early. The moment boredom appears, they switch. The moment resistance shows up, they escape. Escape trains weakness. Boredom is not the problem. Avoidance is. That's the key. Boredom marks the entry point of focus training. If you leave before boredom passes, focus never develops. You must stay. Staying is the skill. At first, staying feels uncomfortable. The mind searches for stimulation. The body feels restless. This is not failure. This is conditioning surfacing. You are seeing the habit clearly for the first time. You do not obey it. You return attention to the task. Again. And again. Returning is the work. Perfect focus is not required. Consistent return is. Each return strengthens discipline. Each escape weakens it. You decide which one you repeat. You don't need their permission to work without interruption. You do not need approval to be unavailable. You are allowed to protect focus. Protection is necessary. Interruptions reset attention. Each reset costs energy. Energy loss accumulates quietly. This is why fragmented work feels exhausting. Not because the work is hard. Because attention keeps restarting. Discipline prevents restart. Discipline keeps attention in place. Structure supports discipline. You do not rely on willpower alone. You remove exits. Notifications off. Unnecessary tabs closed. Devices placed away. This is not extreme. It is intelligent. If exits remain open, escape will happen. Remove the exits. staying becomes easier. That's the key. Design beats resistance. You also choose duration carefully. Too short, and training is weak. Too long, and collapse occurs. You start with blocks you can complete. Completion matters. Completion teaches confidence. Abandonment teaches avoidance. You finish what you start. Even if progress feels slow. Progress under discipline compounds. Speed under distraction does not. You have a choice. You can rush and scatter. Or you can move slowly and build capacity. Capacity matters more. Capacity allows you to hold attention under pressure. Pressure exposes weak focus. Strong focus holds. Building focus also requires accepting mental discomfort. Focus is not always pleasant. It requires sitting with difficulty, with uncertainty, with effort. Most people avoid this. They chase stimulation because it feels lighter. Lightness is temporary. Discipline produces stability. Stability outlasts stimulation. It's not about pleasure. It's about discipline. Discipline stays when pleasure fades. Stillness supports this training. In quiet conditions, attention does not compete with noise. Competition weakens training. Quiet allows depth. Depth trains endurance. This is why silence matters. Silence removes interference. Without interference, attention can strengthen. You notice something important when you stay long enough. After boredom passes, engagement increases. The task becomes clearer. Thinking sharpens. Time feels different. This is the shift most people never reach. They leave just before it happens. That's the key. Depth begins after discomfort. If you want depth, you must pass through boredom. There is no shortcut. You also apply discipline internally. Thoughts will try to pull attention away. Ideas, worries, random impulses. You do not follow them. You note them. You return. No analysis. No argument. Return is enough. Each return strengthens attentional muscle. This is training. Like physical training, it is repetitive, unexciting, effective. You do not train once and stop. You train daily. Short sessions. Protected. Consistent. Consistency builds adaptation. Adaptation makes focus easier over time. Not because you try harder. Because the system has learned. That's the key. Adaptation beats motivation. Motivation fluctuates. Adaptation remains. Over time, something changes. You trust your ability to stay focused. This trust reduces anxiety. Anxiety often comes from unpredictability. Not knowing if you can hold attention. When focus is reliable, pressure feels lighter. You stop rushing. Rushing is a symptom of weak focus. Strong focus allows calm speed. Calm speed is precision. Precision produces results. Results reinforce discipline. The loop strengthens. Building focus through discipline also changes identity. You begin to see yourself differently. Not as someone who tries to focus, but as someone who does. Identity matters. Identity guides behavior automatically. When you see yourself as disciplined, discipline requires less effort. Effort decreases as identity stabilizes. This is how focus becomes normal. Not heroic. Normal. Most people believe focus requires exceptional ability. It does not. It requires consistent discipline. Anyone can build it. Few are willing to stay through discomfort. You do. You have a choice. You can keep escaping when focus becomes difficult. Or you can stay in train capacity. One leads to lifelong distraction. The other leads to control. Control is the goal. Not productivity. Not speed. Control of attention. Attention under control changes everything. Work quality improves. Decision-making sharpens. Emotional regulation strengthens. Because attention is no longer scattered. Scattered attention creates scattered results. Directed attention creates alignment. Alignment reduces friction. Reduced friction conserves energy. Energy conserved supports discipline. Everything connects. This chapter is about deliberate strain. Strain applied correctly strengthens. Avoided strain creates weakness. You apply strain by staying. Staying with one task. Staying without stimulation. Staying through resistance. This is how focus is built. Not by forcing. By remaining. Quietly. Consistently. You do not need perfection. You will drift. You will notice late sometimes. That is normal. The discipline is returning. Returning without frustration. Returning without self-criticism. Correction is calm. Calm correction builds reliability. Reliability builds trust. Trust stabilizes behavior. Stable behavior defeats distraction. You learned how to remove noise. Now you know how to use the quiet. Quiet creates opportunity. Discipline turns opportunity into strength. But even strong focus can be pulled sideways. Not by noise. By emotion. Emotion is the next challenge. If you do not address it, focus will leak again. You learned how to build focus through discipline. Now you must learn how to protect it from emotional pull. Emotion is one of the strongest distractions. Not because it is loud. Because it feels personal. When emotion rises, attention follows automatically. Anger pulls it. Anxiety pulls it. Excitement pulls it. Most people do not notice this pull. They just move. That's the key. Emotion captures attention before you decide. If you do not detach, focus will always leak. You have a choice. You can let emotion steer attention. Or you can separate feeling from action. Detachment is that separation. Detachment does not mean numbness. It means distance. You feel the emotion. You do not obey it. Most people merge with emotion instantly. They think from it. They speak from it. They act from it. This fusion destroys control. When emotion leads, urgency increases. When urgency increases, discipline disappears. This must stop. Emotion is information. Not instruction. That's the key. Feeling is data, not a command. Detachment begins with pause. When emotion appears, you pause before doing anything else. Not to suppress. To observe. Observation slows the system. When the system slows, attention stabilizes. Stillness creates this slowdown. The body reacts before the mind. Breath shortens. Muscles tense. Heart rate rises. If you act here, you act under stress. Stress narrows attention. Narrowed attention misses context. Missing context creates mistakes. You interrupt the sequence. You pause. You regulate the body first. Slow the breath. Lengthen the exhale. Relax the jaw. Lower the shoulders. These are not techniques for calm. They are switches for control. That's the key. Control begins physically. Once the body settles, attention stops scattering. When attention holds, emotion loses leverage. The feeling may still be there. But it no longer drives behavior. You don't need their permission to pause internally. You do not owe immediate expression. Silence is allowed. Most emotional damage comes from speed. People rush to discharge feeling. They want relief. They want release. Release feels good briefly. Then consequences arrive. Detachment trades relief for control. It's not about comfort. It's about discipline. Discipline delays action until clarity returns. Emotion peaks quickly when not fed. It rises. It crests. It falls. Reaction feeds the peak. Stillness lets it pass. That's the key. You do not eliminate emotion. You outlast it. This requires practice. You start with small moments. Minor irritation. Impatience. Mild frustration. These are training grounds. You feel the emotion. You pause. You do nothing. Not forever. Just long enough to regain authority. At first, the urge to act feels intense. The mind demands resolution. The body demands movement. This is conditioning. You do not obey. Each time you stay still, tolerance increases. Tolerance is strength. Over time, emotional impact feels lighter. Not because you feel less. Because you are less moved. Most people believe control means suppression. They push emotion down. They ignore it. That fails. Suppression builds tension. Tension leaks. Detachment is different. You allow emotion to exist. You refuse to let it decide. This preserves energy. Energy wasted on reaction is unrecoverable. Energy preserved compounds. You have a choice. You can let emotion pull attention away. Or you can let attention remain steady while emotion passes. One leads to volatility. The other leads to consistency. Consistency builds trust. Trust in yourself. Trust in your timing. When you trust your ability to stay composed, fear weakens. You stop rushing to protect image. You stop reacting to prove a point. You stop discharging emotion to feel better. You hold position. Holding position is power. Detachment also applies internally. Thoughts surge with emotion. Judgments appear. Stories form. Predictions escalate. You pause here too. You do not believe the first thought. First thoughts are often emotional. Second thoughts are clearer. Stillness allows the second thought to appear. You label the emotion. This is anger. This is fear. This is frustration. Labeling creates distance. Distance breaks fusion. Fusion is when emotion and identity collapse into one. When fused, emotion decides. Detachment prevents fusion. You are not the feeling. You are the observer of it. This distinction changes behavior immediately. You stop escalating situations. You stop regretting words. You stop replaying moments. Because fewer mistakes are made. Mistakes come from acting while fused. Detachment breaks that pattern. You don't need their permission to stay composed under pressure. You do not need validation to remain calm. You are allowed to pause. Pause is not weakness. It is leverage. Stillness gives you leverage over time. When you respond later, responses improve. When you respond calmer, outcomes improve. This builds credibility. With others. With yourself. Credibility with yourself matters most. You begin to trust your reactions. Not because they are fast. Because they are deliberate. This trust reduces anxiety. Anxiety comes from unpredictability. Predictable behavior creates safety. Safety allows focus to hold. Focus is what distraction tries to steal. Emotion is one of its main tools. Detach from emotion, and distraction loses power. That's the key. Attention follows emotion only when emotion is obeyed. Discipline changes that relationship. Discipline decides when emotion is consulted and when it is ignored. This is not coldness. It is accuracy. Accuracy requires distance. Distance comes from pause. Pause is trained. You train it daily. In conversations. In work. In private thought. Each pause strengthens the habit. Over time, detachment becomes automatic. Emotion still appears, but it no longer hijacks attention. This is reliability. Reliability creates calm confidence. Not loud confidence. Quiet certainty. Certainty that you will not lose control under emotional pressure. This certainty stabilizes behavior. Stable behavior defeats distraction. This chapter is about protection. Protecting focus from emotional pull. Without this protection, all other discipline leaks. With it, attention holds. You learned how to build focus through discipline. Now you have learned how to keep emotion from stealing it. Next, you must address what silently breaks focus even when emotion is controlled. Fragmentation. Small switches. Unfinished loops. Hidden drains. You learned how to detach from emotional pull. Now it's time to remove what fractures attention. Fragmentation is silent sabotage. It does not announce itself. It accumulates. Attention splits. Thinking thins. Control weakens. Most people live fragmented without realizing it. They switch constantly. Tasks. Tabs. Thoughts. They call it productivity. It is not. That's the key. Fragmentation feels busy, but it produces little. You have a choice. You can keep allowing attention to fracture, or you can restore continuity. Continuity is power. Fragmentation happens every time attention jumps without closure. You start something. You stop midway. You move to something else. The mind does not reset cleanly. Residue remains. Residue is mental noise. Noise reduces clarity. Reduced clarity increases mistakes. Mistakes increase stress. Stress feeds more fragmentation. This loop must be broken. Most people underestimate the cost of switching. They believe they can jump back easily. They cannot. Every switch taxes the nervous system. The cost is cumulative. You feel it as fatigue, as irritability, as scattered thinking. That's the key. Fragmentation drains energy before you notice. One of the biggest sources is multitasking. The brain does not multitask. It switches rapidly. Rapid switching feels efficient. It is not. It fractures attention. Each fragment carries less force. Force comes from concentration. Concentration requires staying. Staying feels uncomfortable at first. The urge to switch appears quickly. That urge is habit. You do not obey. You stay. Staying retrains the system. It teaches the nervous system that continuity is safe. Safety reduces urgency. Urgency fuels switching. Remove urgency. Fragmentation weakens. You don't need their permission to work on one thing at a time. You do not need approval to finish before starting something new. Finishing matters. Completion restores integrity. Integrity stabilizes attention. Another source of fragmentation is unfinished loops. Tasks left open. Decisions postponed without capture. Problems replayed mentally. The mind keeps these active, even when you are not thinking about them directly. This background load drains focus. You feel busy without progress. That's the key. Unfinished loops steal attention silently. The solution is closure. You either complete the task, or you capture. it clearly. Writing closes loops. When a task is written with the next action, the mind releases it. Release restores capacity. Capacity allows depth. Depth produces results. Most people try to hold everything in their head. This fragments attention constantly. You stop doing that. You externalize. Externalizing is not weakness. It is structure. Structure protects attention. Fragmentation also happens internally. Thoughts interrupt each other. Concerns overlap. Ideas pull focus sideways. This internal switching feels like thinking. It is not. It is noise. You correct it the same way you correct external switching. You stay with one line of thought. When another thought appears, you note it. You do not follow it. You return. Return restores continuity. Continuity strengthens focus. This requires stillness. Stillness slows thinking enough to notice switches. Without stillness, fragmentation happens automatically. Stillness is not passive. It is stabilizing. It allows attention to settle into one place. When attention settles, thinking deepens. Deep thinking produces insight. Insight does not come from constant movement. It comes from sustained contact. Most people never experience this. They leave too early. They confuse restlessness with inefficiency. Restlessness is simply the mind unused to staying. You retrain it. Again. And again. Each time you resist switching, fragmentation weakens. This is training. You do not need perfection. You will switch sometimes. The discipline is noticing quickly and returning. Returning is correction. Correction is calm. Calm correction builds reliability. Reliability builds trust. Trust in yourself stabilizes behavior. Stable behavior defeats distraction. You have a choice. You can continue scattering attention. Or you can restore wholeness. Wholeness changes how you operate. You feel calmer. More present. Less rushed. Not because life slowed down. Because attention stopped splitting. Fragmentation also destroys momentum. Momentum requires continuity. When you keep switching, momentum never forms. Without momentum, effort feels heavy. With momentum, effort feels lighter. Momentum conserves energy. Energy conserved supports discipline. Everything connects. Most people try to manage time better. They should manage attention better. Time management without attentional integrity fails. Integrity comes from sequence. One task. One thought. One action. Sequence is not limitation. It is order. Order creates stability. Stability supports control. That's the key. Control requires coherence. Coherence is attention unified. You achieve coherence by enforcing sequence. You decide what is being done now. Everything else waits. Waiting is not neglect. It is prioritization. Prioritization reduces pressure. Pressure often comes from trying to hold too much at once. Reduce load. Load reduction restores clarity. You don't need their permission to simplify. You do not need validation to slow down mentally. Simplicity is strength. Fragmentation is also encouraged by environment. Too many open apps. Too many notifications. Too many visible options. Each one is a potential switch. You close them deliberately. This is not extreme. It is maintenance. Maintenance prevents breakdown. You shape the environment to support continuity. Environment shapes behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. This is practical. No philosophy. Design. Designing for continuity reduces fragmentation automatically. You do not rely on restraint. You rely on structure. Structure outlasts mood. Mood fluctuates. Structure holds. That's the key. Structure beats effort. As fragmentation decreases, stillness becomes natural. Silence no longer feels empty. It feels stable. Stability allows focus to deepen. Deeper focus improves judgment. Improved judgment improves action. Action becomes cleaner. Clean action produces clean results. This is the payoff. Not speed. Not busyness. Control. Fragmentation is the enemy of control. Eliminate it, and attention regains strength. This chapter is about repair. Repairing damage caused by constant switching. Repairing habits of partial attention. Repairing internal noise. Repair is quiet. No announcements. No drama. Just enforcement. Enforcement builds reliability. Reliability builds confidence. Confidence reduces anxiety. Anxiety often comes from feeling scattered. When attention is whole, anxiety drops. That's the key. Wholeness calms the system. You learned how to detach from emotional pull. Now you have learned how to remove structural breaks in attention. Next, you must address timing. Even with unified attention, acting too fast destroys control. The pause before action is where discipline becomes leverage. You learned how to eliminate fragmentation. Now it's time to learn how to pause before acting. Action taken too fast becomes reaction. Reaction is where distraction regains control. Most people believe speed is strength. They move immediately. They respond instantly. They act before settling. This is not strength. That's the key. Speed without stillness is weakness. You have a choice. You can act the moment something appears. Or you can pause and decide. That pause changes everything. Most mistakes are not caused by lack of intelligence. They are caused by lack of timing. Timing begins with stillness. When something demands your attention, the body reacts first. Breath tightens. Muscles engage. Thoughts accelerate. If you act here, attention is already compromised. Compromised attention produces compromised decisions. You interrupt the sequence. You pause. This pause is not delay. It is control. Control requires space. Space allows clarity. Clarity guides correct action. Most people skip this because stillness feels uncomfortable. Silence exposes uncertainty. Uncertainty feels threatening. But uncertainty handled calmly is leverage. That's the key. Stillness reveals what urgency hides. Urgency is emotional. Emotion wants discharge. Discipline wants accuracy. Accuracy requires time. Not minutes. Seconds. Seconds are enough. Those seconds allow the nervous system to settle. When the system settles, attention gathers. Gathered attention restores choice. You don't need their permission to pause before responding. You do not owe immediate action. Silence is allowed. Most people believe pausing makes them look weak. It does not. It makes them unpredictable. Unpredictability increases authority. When you do not react immediately, others slow down. Pressure decreases. You gain leverage without effort. Pause before action also applies internally. A thought appears. An interpretation forms. A plan rushes forward. You pause here too. You do not act on the first thought. First thoughts are often emotional. Second thoughts are clearer. Stillness allows the second thought to surface. That's the key. Clarity is delayed by seconds, not lost forever. Most people never wait long enough to find it. They act too soon. You stop doing that. Pause is a skill. Like any skill, it must be trained. You start with small moments. Minor irritation. Mild impatience. Small urges to switch tasks. These are training opportunities. You feel the impulse. You pause. You do nothing. Not forever. Just long enough to regain authority. At first, the pause feels uncomfortable. The mind demands resolution. The body demands movement. This is conditioning. You do not obey. Each time you stay still, tolerance increases. Tolerance is strength. Strength reduces urgency. Urgency fuels distraction. Remove urgency, and distraction weakens. Pause before action also protects focus. Many people lose focus not because of noise, but because they move too quickly between decisions. They act before the previous action has settled. This creates overlap. Overlap fragments attention. Pause creates separation. Separation preserves continuity. Continuity stabilizes focus. Focus is what you are protecting. Stillness before action also improves emotional regulation. Emotion peaks quickly. If you act at the peak, consequences follow. If you wait, intensity drops. The feeling remains, but it loses control. You do not eliminate emotion. You outlast it. That's the key. Emotion fades faster than discipline. Most people act to relieve emotion. Relief is temporary. Consequences last. Discipline trades relief for control. Control produces better outcomes. Better outcomes reduce future emotional load. This is long-term regulation. You have a choice. You can keep discharging emotion through action. Or you can hold still and let it pass. One creates volatility. The other creates stability. Stability defeats distraction. Pause before action also sharpens perception. When you pause, you notice details. Tone. Timing. Context. Details matter. Details guide precision. Precision reduces error. Error creates stress. Stress feeds distraction. Everything connects. Stillness breaks the chain. Most people think they think before acting. They do not. They feel. Then they justify. Justification is not thinking. Thinking requires space. Space comes from pause. Pause is non-negotiable. It's not about confidence. It's about discipline. Discipline respects sequence. Regulate. Observe. Decide. Act. Reaction reverses this order. Act. Explain. Regret. You choose the correct sequence. You practice it daily. In conversations. In work. In private thought. Each pause strengthens the habit. Over time, pause becomes automatic. You no longer have to remind yourself. The system pauses on its own. This is training completed. When pause is automatic, distraction loses timing advantage. Distraction relies on speed. It captures attention in the first seconds. When you slow those seconds, distraction fails. That's the key. Distraction cannot survive stillness. Stillness does not mean inaction. Externally, action may still be fast. Internally, it is calm. Calm speed is precision. Panicked speed is chaos. You choose calm speed. Pause before action also reduces regret. Most regret comes from acting too fast. Words spoken prematurely. Decisions made emotionally. Commitments accepted impulsively. Pause eliminates most of this. You say less. But what you say holds weight. You act less. But what you do is effective. This is efficiency. Not doing more. Doing less, correctly. You don't need their permission to slow your internal timing. You do not need validation to respond later. You are allowed to take control of your pace. Pace determines quality. Quality determines outcomes. Outcomes reinforce discipline. The loop strengthens. Pause before action also reinforces identity. You begin to see yourself as composed, as deliberate, as stable under pressure. Identity matters. Identity shapes behavior automatically. When you see yourself as someone who pauses, pausing requires less effort. Effort decreases. Reliability increases. Reliability defeats distraction. This chapter is about leverage. Leverage gained by waiting seconds before acting. Those seconds separate impulse from intention. They separate distraction from control. You do not need long meditations. You need micropauses. Micropauses practiced consistently change everything. Pause before opening an app. Pause before responding. Pause before switching tasks. These moments add up. They retrain the nervous system. The system learns that speed is optional. When speed is optional, control returns. You have a choice. You can keep acting immediately. Or you can pause deliberately. One keeps distraction alive. The other starves it. Starving distraction is the goal. Not by force. By timing. You learned how distraction is trained. You learned how reaction feeds it. You learned how selection and silence weaken it. You learned how discipline builds focus. You learned how emotion pulls attention away. You learned how fragmentation breaks continuity. Now you have learned the hinge point. Pause before action. This pause protects everything you have built. Without it, distraction re-enters through speed. With it, control holds. Next, you must make this pause permanent. Not something you remember sometimes. Something that happens automatically. So discipline does not depend on energy. So focus holds even when you are tired. Control should not depend on effort. If it does, it will fail. It will fail when you are tired. When pressure rises. When emotion spikes. That's the key. Effort fades. Systems hold. Most people rely on willpower. They try to decide correctly in the moment. They try to stay disciplined when it matters most. This breaks down. Decision fatigue sets in. Attention weakens. Impulse takes over. If focus requires constant effort, it is unstable. Focus must become automatic. You have a choice. You can keep managing attention manually. Or you can build structures that operate without debate. Automatic focus means fewer decisions. Fewer decisions mean fewer failures. Emotion exploits hesitation. It enters during uncertainty. It hijacks during negotiation. Automation removes negotiation. Defined behavior executes. Undefined behavior invites impulse. Most mistakes happen in moments of choice. Not because the choice is hard. Because nothing is decided in advance. Standards prevent this. Standards are rules you do not renegotiate. They define how attention is used. When distraction appears, the rule applies. When pressure increases, the rule applies. When emotion rises, the rule applies. Without standards, everything becomes situational. Situational control is unreliable. You don't need their permission to set internal standards. You do not need approval to enforce them. You are allowed to decide in advance. Standards must be simple. Complex rules collapse under stress. Simple rules execute. No checking during focus blocks. No responding while emotionally elevated. No multitasking. These are not preferences. They are defaults. Defaults remove decision-making. Decision-making drains attention. That's the key. The less you decide, the more consistent you become. Most people think discipline means resisting temptation repeatedly. That is inefficient. Resistance costs energy. Automation removes temptation. You do not resist distraction. You remove access. You do not fight impulse. You design conditions that prevent it. It's not about strength. It's about discipline. Discipline designs the environment. Notifications off. Apps closed. Devices placed away. If exits remain open, escape will happen. Remove the exits. Staying becomes easier. You have a choice. You can keep fighting distraction daily. Or you can eliminate the conditions that create it. Elimination is calmer. Stillness helps identify where automation is missing. In quiet moments, you notice where you hesitate, where you justify, where you bargain with yourself. Those moments reveal weak structure. You do not argue there. You install a rule. Rule replaces debate. Debate drains energy. Rules conserve it. Automation also applies internally. Thought loops appear repeatedly. Worry. Rehearsal. Judgment. You do not analyze them each time. You install a response. Label. Release. Return. No discussion. This pattern repeats until it becomes default. That's the key. Repetition installs automation. You repeat the rule until behavior follows without effort. Over time, something changes. You stop feeling tempted. Not because temptation disappeared. Because the system knows what happens next. Predictability creates calm. Calm stabilizes attention. Automatic focus protects you when energy is low. When tired, you fall back to defaults. If defaults are weak, distraction wins. If defaults are strong, discipline holds. This is why automation matters most on bad days. You plan for fatigue, not for ideal conditions. Everyone is disciplined when rested. Few are disciplined when depleted. Automation carries you then. You don't need their permission to design for your worst days. You do not need validation to reduce decision load. Reducing load is intelligent. Load collapses attention. Most burnout is not from work. It is from constant deciding. What to do next? What to respond to? What to ignore? Automation removes this noise. When fewer decisions are required, focus stabilizes. Stable focus supports calm. Calm improves accuracy. Accuracy improves outcomes. Everything connects. You have a choice. You can keep relying on effort. Or you can let structure carry discipline. Effort spikes. Structure holds. Automatic focus also builds trust in yourself. You know how you will behave. You trust your process. Second guessing fades. Second guessing drains energy. Trust restores it. Trust reduces anxiety. Anxiety comes from unpredictability. Automation creates predictability. Predictability creates stability. Stability supports attention. Attention supports control. Control defeats distraction. Automatic focus is quiet. No struggle. No drama. Just execution. This is why disciplined people appear calm. They are not fighting impulses constantly. They are following systems. Systems do not argue. They operate. You stop waking up wondering if you will be focused. You already know. This certainty changes everything. Pressure feels manageable. Distraction feels weaker. Emotion feels contained. Because behavior is defined. That's the key. Control that depends on mood is not control. Control that runs automatically is. This chapter is about permanence. Not temporary discipline. Not situational focus. Permanent structure. When focus is automatic, attention stops leaking. Emotion stops hijacking. Pressure stops distorting decisions. The system runs. You are no longer managing yourself every moment. You are operating. You learned how to pause before action. Now you have learned how to make that pause reliable. Next, this way of operating must become identity. Not a technique you use. A standard you live by. Living undistracted is not a technique. It is a standard. A standard you enforce quietly. Daily. Without negotiation. Most people treat focus as something they turn on and off. They focus when conditions are ideal. They lose it when pressure rises. That is not control. Control means focus holds regardless of conditions. That's the key. Undistracted living is not situational. It is structural. You have a choice. You can keep reacting to what appears. Or you can live from defined attention. Defined attention means you already know where focus belongs. There is no debate. When something tries to pull you away, the answer is already decided. This removes friction. Friction is what exhausts people. Not effort. Not work. Indecision. Living undistracted means attention is governed. Not by mood. Not by urgency. By standards. Standards determine where attention lives. When standards are weak, distraction writes your schedule. When standards are strong, attention stays where it belongs. You don't need their permission to live this way. You do not need approval to be less available. You are allowed to protect your attention. Protection is not isolation. It is precision. Precision creates leverage. Living undistracted also means accepting responsibility. You stop blaming the environment. You stop blaming technology. You stop blaming people. You recognize that attention is yours to command. This is not heavy. It is freeing. Because once attention is yours, direction returns. Direction simplifies life. Most people feel overwhelmed because attention is scattered. Scattered attention creates scattered priorities. Scattered priorities create constant pressure. Pressure feeds distraction. This cycle ends when attention is directed. Directed attention reduces options. Reducing options reduces stress. That's the key. Less choice creates more control. Living undistracted also means you stop chasing stimulation. You stop filling every gap. Silence becomes acceptable. Waiting becomes normal. Stillness becomes familiar. This does not make life dull. It makes it clear. Clarity improves decisions. Decisions shape outcomes. Outcomes reinforce discipline. Everything connects. You begin to notice a shift. You speak less, but with accuracy. You act less, but with impact. You react less, but with control. This is not withdrawal. It is efficiency. Efficiency comes from attention placed deliberately. Living undistracted also means long-term thinking. You understand that attention compounds. Small daily choices shape weeks. Weeks shape years. You stop trading long-term control for short-term. Relief. Relief is temporary. Direction lasts. It's not about comfort. It's about discipline. Discipline keeps attention aligned when comfort tempts you away. You have a choice. You can relieve discomfort through distraction. Or you can endure briefly and preserve direction. Endurance strengthens. Avoidance weakens. That's the key. What you escape controls you. Living undistracted also changes how emotion affects you. Emotion still appears. But it no longer hijacks behavior. You feel it. You observe it. You act from standard. This reduces regret. Regret is costly. It drains energy and confidence. Fewer impulsive actions mean fewer corrections. Correction requires effort. Prevention requires discipline. Living undistracted is preventive control. You design life to reduce error. Most people live reactively. They clean up after distraction. You prevent it. Prevention is quieter, more effective, less exhausting. Living undistracted also reshapes identity. You no longer see yourself as someone who struggles to focus. You see yourself as someone who decides. Identity matters. Identity guides behavior automatically. When focus is part of identity, discipline requires less effort. Effort decreases. Consistency increases. Consistency defeats distraction. You trust yourself more. Trust reduces anxiety. Anxiety comes from unpredictability. When you know how you will behave, fear weakens. You stop fearing interruptions. You stop fearing pressure. You stop fearing emotion. Because you know the process. Pause. Observe. Decide. Act. This process holds. Living undistracted also requires boundaries. Not aggressive ones. Clear ones. When attention is protected, others adapt. When you respond less urgently, urgency fades. When you move deliberately, others slow down. This is influence through stability. Not force. Stability is persuasive. It changes dynamics quietly. You don't need to explain this. You live it. Results speak. Living undistracted also simplifies choices. You stop asking, "What should I do now?" You already know. Standards answer for you. This reduces mental load. Mental load exhausts people more than work. Reducing it restores energy. Energy supports discipline. Discipline sustains attention. Attention defines outcomes. This is the chain. Most people try to fix distraction with hacks, tips, tools, shortcuts. They fail because they do not change standards. Standards change behavior. Behavior changes identity. Identity changes life. That's the key. Undistracted living is an identity shift, not a productivity trick. It requires consistency, not intensity. Intensity burns out. Consistency compounds. You do not need perfection. You will drift sometimes. That is normal. The discipline is returning. Return without judgment. Return without drama. Correction is calm. Calm correction builds reliability. Reliability builds confidence. Confidence reinforces discipline. The loop strengthens. Living undistracted also restores presence. You are where you are, not mentally elsewhere. Presence improves experience, not emotional highs. Clarity. Clarity allows you to act fully. Partial attention creates partial results. Full attention produces complete outcomes. You feel complete. Not rushed. Not scattered. Complete. This is not because life slowed down. Because attention stopped splitting. Living undistracted is not restrictive. It is liberating. You are no longer pulled by everything. You choose. Choice is power. This book has shown you the path. Distraction is trained. Reaction feeds it. Uncontrolled access fuels it. Noise amplifies it. Discipline builds focus. Emotion pulls attention away. Fragmentation breaks continuity. Pause restores control. Automation makes it reliable. Now comes the final step. Living it. Every day. Quietly. No announcements. No motivation. Just standards. Standards enforced become identity. Identity lived becomes outcome. Live undistracted. That is control. And control is freedom. Distraction will always exist. Control is the difference. You do not eliminate distraction. You outgrow it. By pausing. Before reacting. By choosing what enters your mind. By enforcing discipline daily. Attention is finite. Spend it deliberately. From this point forward, reduce noise. Hold focus. Act with stillness. Do not wait for motivation. Do not negotiate with impulse. Overcome distractions by controlling attention. And control attention by discipline.